But we're going to more than make up for that in quality this morning. C. Milner and I met about 2 years ago. Most of us have kinfolks because they were assigned to us. I mean, anybody here pick their brothers or their cousins or their aunts or whatever. We were having lunch, and the former director of the Mississippi Baptist Children's Village was retiring and wanted me to meet C. Milner, who's taken over. And turns out C. grew up in the Mississippi Baptist Children's Village. And I asked him if he knew Wanda Bricker, my cousin who graduated from MC and took over a cottage there. And he said, yes, she was my mother. She raised me. I was put in her cottage when I was 5 years old, and she's been a mother to me all my life. So you're my cousin. I didn't realize. So we got to pick him, and he's our favorite cousin, I'll tell you. And we're excited to have him with us today. As far as I know, he's the only person who grew up in an orphanage and now runs an orphanage. And Scene left a very comfortable law practice in Clinton, where he was doing real estate and family law, and resigned that and took over the Mississippi Baptist Children's Village. Has done an excellent job running it. So we've got a lot to look forward to. Last chance, anything we need to be praying about? I guess the Ole Miss people will need a prayer of thanksgiving. My son needs a prayer. Humility and condolences. But anyway, y'all join me in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thanks so much for this beautiful day, and as we worship you, thank you for all of your gifts to us and to our class, and for the blessings that we have in store during this very special season of the year. We pray that you'll bless the ministry of St. Milner and Elizabeth and all they do. These things we ask in the Master's name. Amen. Amen.
Good morning. And Bill, I really appreciate you asking me, and thank y'all for having me here. I don't know, it's great coming back to First Baptist, because like Bill said, I grew up at the Baptist Children's Village, and it's when the campus was out west of Clinton, or actually east of Clinton, and we had 12 cottages, and depending on what cottage you went to, that determined which church you went to. And throughout Jackson, there was First Baptist, Calvary Baptist, and Parkway Baptist. Well, I was in Gaddis Cottage, and I came to First Baptist. So I grew up pretty much in this church and was baptized in this church. So I was excited to come back and speak today. And then I got nervous, and I thought, well, okay, is this good, or am I returning to the scene of a crime? Maybe everybody that knew me then, like the Wallers, they just won't say anything. They'll just stay quiet. But if you hadn't had a chance, do meet my wife. She is definitely the better half of this. She grew up in Nigeria, Africa. Her parents were medical missionaries in Nigeria. That worked out very well for me, because my friends and my brothers say, it's a good thing you married somebody on another continent, because nobody on this one would have had you. They didn't know you. But I did grow up at your Baptist Children's Village, and you're going to hear me refer to your Baptist Children's Village several times, and I'll explain why. That I need you to understand, and all the Baptist churches in the state, and all the Baptist people to understand this ministry belongs to you. The ministry does not belong to me. God has given me a ministry here, but I'll explain why in a minute. I did grow up there. I loved my childhood. I wouldn't trade my childhood with anybody. And I hold this informal record of having lived there longer than any other child in the village's history. I lived there for 18 years, from 69 until I graduated from Mississippi College in 87. Now, if you do the math on that, there's one thing that my brother would want you to know. There were 5 Milner children that went through your Baptist Children's Village. 4 were boys, and one was my sister, and she was a girl. And if you do the math on that, 18 years, there's too many years in there. So I hold the record over the brother that's closest to me for one reason and one reason only. I flunked the 3rd and the 7th grade, and it only works. And he would want you to know that. Okay, so for him, I'll let y'all know that's why. There are many things that we do that cause our own failure, and there are many things that happen that cause a failure that we can't help. What I've learned, though, even though flunking grades and mistakes that I have made that were my fault, there is a Father, there is a Heavenly Father, there is a Savior who can still turn it into something beautiful. And that's kind of taken off from where I want to go today and speak about the Baptist Children's Village. If you have your Bible or your digital written Word of God, like I like to carry around with me, the verse I want to talk about today comes from Jeremiah. And this is a very popular verse. It's now one of my favorites, hadn't always been. It's Jeremiah 29:11. And he says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." We hear this all the time. And this is a comforting verse. But I want you to know that there was a time in my life when, whoa, if God's got a plan for my life, Lord, you got a plan for me. I don't want any part of it. Okay? I think I can do a better job on my own. I've got this alcoholic mother. I've got a criminal father. My father abandoned my mother after my youngest brother was 5 days old, and we sat on a park bench in Sacramento, California. She was able to get charity and train fare and get us all back to Claiborne County, Mississippi, which is where her family was from. And down in Port Gibson, Mississippi, there we lived for 2 more years. When I was 5 years old, and my youngest brother was then 3 years old, and my oldest brother was 8 years old, life got to be too much for her. And I want you to know that I had my mother and the privilege of knowing my mother until I was a sophomore in college. But on that day in Claiborne County, Mississippi, life had gotten to be too big. The problems were too many, and we heard the gunshot on the back porch. And I can remember at 5, me and my brothers and sisters dragging her back into the kitchen. And then my oldest brother had to run 2 miles to the closest house that had a telephone. Why do we tell this story? Is it simply for the drama of it? Please understand, never for that. But what I want you to understand here is what families and children face. These are just realities. I've got one of my dearest friends in the world is a kid that I grew up with at the village, and we refer to each other as village kids all the time. It's a term of endearment. And so when I call him, I say, "Hey, village kid." I used to call my children village kid, and at church I would say, "Hey, come here, you little village kid." And my wife said, "Cindy, you really need to cut that out." And I said, "Why?" She goes, "Well, we have village kids going to church here now." And I think they think you're talking to them. And so, hey, she made me cut that out. But when I talked to David, and David speaks for the village all the time and gives his testimony, his first recollection of his parents where they were shooting at one another through a car that he was sitting in. And he came to the Baptist Children's Village when he was 5 years old. So Lord, if you're all loving and you're all powerful and you're in control of all things, yeah, I think I can come up with a better plan for my life. We've heard that challenge from agnostics and from atheists, haven't we? Hey, if God were all loving and all powerful, why would there be suffering in the world? Well, that's kind of where I was coming from. What about that? I think I could come up with a better plan. More likely than not, God didn't really exist at all. When the house parents would talk to me about Christ and the love of Christ, and I'm like, yeah, okay, good. That's good. But you don't see it from mine. I see it differently. And so I came to Christ under a different set of circumstances, and I live with this idea, wait a minute, if there's a plan, how is this working out? Well, that's where your Baptist Children's Village comes in, and I want you to understand, and I want you to learn about the village today. And I'm going to throw a lot of information at you, so if you have any questions, please, I'll try to save time at the end. I want you to know. But the question is, what do you do? What does the Baptist Children's Village do? And where did it come from? I want you to know that you've been rescuing children and working with families for 120 years. You received your first child at the Baptist Children's Village, and I was, brother, tell me your name again. Paul. I was speaking with Paul earlier, and he remembered when the Baptist Children's Village was over here on Woodrow Wilson. And you received your first child on Woodrow Wilson on May the 12th of 1897. It was really started, the whole mission of the Baptist Children's Village was started by a pastor from Senatobia, Mississippi, the Reverend L.S. Foster, First Baptist Church, Senatobia. And he publishes in the Baptist Record, he writes this statement: if this thought is of God, he will put it into the heart of some person to send a contribution for the cause. And December of that same year, a lady from Tillatobia, a Baptist woman from Tillatobia, Mississippi, she writes him back, and with these words, with my prayers I enclose this dollar for the institution. If it finds company enough to affect a movement, you will hear from me again. In 1897, you received your first child at the Baptist Children's Village. I want to put that in a little historical context for you. Senatobia, Mississippi didn't receive its first phone system until 1898. So the Baptists in the state started this ministry without a phone, without a computer, iPad, iFax, Twitter, Facebook, or any of those other things that we think we have to have now. They just had a willing heart, a submissive heart, and a willingness to work. I want you to know what you do. This is your business model. And I know we've got business people in here. This is the business model of the Baptist Children's Village. You seek out devastation and nothing but people's problems and debt. You take them on yourself, and then you look them in the face and say, because of the love of Christ for you, this isn't going to cost you a dime. That's your business model. We seek out those benches that are sitting out there. You know, those trailers everybody knows about, those homes everybody knows about, those apartments everybody knows about, where things just aren't right. That's who we seek out, and we look to reunite them and put them back together. One of the things my wife always wants to make sure that y'all know what actually happens. So I want you to know when somebody calls us, and a lot of times those calls come from pastors and lay people just like y'all that says, hey, I've got this family that lives here and they're on hard times. Some things aren't right. Maybe there are addiction issues in the house. Maybe there's criminal issues in the house. Whatever the issues are, we don't care. Bring them to us. Let us give them a call. We'll contact them. We'll sit down. If we can talk to mom and we can help her, and this is a situation that we can do, then we'll take the children in. And then we'll put a team meeting together with a case manager, a therapist, the parents, and the children. Within a week of getting those children into your Baptist Children's Village, we're going to have a team meeting. And we're going to sit down and we're going to try to diagnose what's the problem. Why is this family not being representative of Christ in His church? What can we do? If it's addiction issues, we'll get mom to where she needs to be to work on that while we'll take care of her children. If it's job issues, we had a case one time where our house parent takes her cottage to Walmart, just like you take your children, and they're going grocery shopping. And if she's herding the cats into Walmart, she looks over and has a lady crying in her car. Well, there's kids running around her car. Some of the kids were sitting on top of the car. She recognizes this situation. Well, she doesn't walk on to Walmart. She walks over to the car and knocks on the window and says, ma'am, can I help you? And she rolls the window down and she's in tears and she said, no, you can't help me. My husband just left us. We don't have anything. I don't know what we're doing. And she said, with a smile on her face, well, no, I can help you. God has provided a way. Within 2 hours, we had those children. Mom rode with us to one of our campuses. We had those children in our care. That family was with us for 2 years while we worked with mom. She just needed job skills. So we sent her somewhere where she finished a little education. She got her job skills, and they were with us 2 years now. That family's reunited and put back together. And they also attend a Baptist church. And we still love hearing from them. So this is what you've done for 120 years. And when I came on staff last year as your executive director, I'm kind of a numbers guy. I practiced law for 23 years. I was a litigator around the state of Mississippi. God blessed me with my own firm, and everything was going well. But when I came back, I got my own file, and I kind of started reading it. I thought, okay, yeah, I probably shouldn't read this. Kind of makes me question some of my decisions. But I wanted to know, how many children have been through your Baptist Children's Village? How many? And so I had them go, and the most conservative number, so I won't be accused of ministerial math, I said, make sure it's a number I can prove. The number of children that is absolute that come through your Baptist Children's Village is 8,000 in 120 years. 8,000. Let me put that into a little perspective. If it doesn't sound like a big number, think about this. You have introduced or presented the gospel of Christ through your ministry to 67 new families and new children every single year for 120 years. If that doesn't sound like a lot, think about it this way. Those children, my family included, there were 5 of us, we're going to grow up and we're going to have children. But now that we came through the Baptist Children's Village, you have children who are serving as deacons. You have children who are serving as pastors, missionaries, Christian businessmen, Christian businesswomen, nurses. We have just reunited with an old friend who's a pharmacist up north. They're all over the planet, and they have children. To the Milner children, the 5 of us, there were 16 children. Now, I'm the only one without a grandchild, and they don't let me forget that. I'm getting a little impatient. But anyway, think about that, and think about the economy of God and how this works, and multiply it 8,000 times. I'm going to spend tonight with my brother, the knucklehead. His child is coming to spend the night with us, and his child is the video director at Shades Mountain Baptist Church, and they do all this, one of these mega churches, and they do all this video stuff, and he has done a movie, a Christmas movie, and they bought all the airtime on the 4 major networks throughout Alabama, and so the weekend of December the 15th, his Christmas movie will show on every local TV station throughout the entire state of Alabama. And that's one of your grandchildren. Multiply that by 8,000. He told me when he shot the movie, he said, "Uncle Sam, what we've got," he sent me the script. I said, "Hey, it looks good." He said, "Well, we got a video production group, and they're videoing us making this movie." And I said, "Really, why are y'all doing that?" And he said, "Well, Uncle Sam, what we want to do is in January, we're going to publish this to other churches so that churches can learn how to make Christian movies, and we can reclaim this industry for the cause of Christ." Multiply it by 8,000 times. That's what you've done through your ministry and continue to do through your ministry at the Baptist Children's Village. You've done it for 120 years. I got to thinking over it just historically. You've been through World War I, World War II, the Afghanistan war, ISIS, the war in Iraq. We've seen Democratic presidents. We've seen Republican presidents. We've seen the Great Recession. We've seen the Great Depression. And you haven't stopped for 120 years. I want you to know the backbone of the Baptist Children's Village is our house parents. The way it's set up, you have 7 campuses around the state of Mississippi now. Starting in Independence, Mississippi, we have 2 cottages on that campus, one for boys, one for girls. You have one in Water Valley, Mississippi, the same situation. Does anybody know where Nanawoya is? Nanawoya? I still don't have a clue. Every time I have to go to that campus, I pull over and call them, and they just come get me, and I follow them. But it's near Louisville, okay? You have one in Louisville, one in Starr, Mississippi, Brookhaven, Mississippi, Waynesboro, Mississippi, and then down on the coast in Wiggins, Mississippi. Anybody a baseball fan? Baseball aficionado? Dizzy Dean? Our boys' cottage on the Wiggins campus, the Dean family donated all of that land, and they live in Dizzy Dean's house that he grew up in. So we have some people just from all over the country who will come through and say, "Hey, can we see the house?" And so they get to go. Just kind of a point of interest there. But the people who live in these cottages with your children, they are our house parents. This is who Wanda Bricker was and Bill Bricker. They were house parents, and they're the people that do the cooking. They're the people that check the temperature, bathe the babies, do the homework, and all of these things. These are the missionaries. And I'm constantly looking for missionary-minded people who, maybe they think they're in the 4th quarter of their life, but God can still use them, and God can use you. So if you know of somebody who think they may be called to work with children and help, please tell them to give us a call, because the fields are white unto harvest, but the laborers are few, and it's very difficult. We have up in the north part of the state 2 cottages right now that are not open, and they're not open because I can't put house parents in there to take care of the children. So we're constantly working for the house parents. The house parents, when I say they're the real missionaries and the heroes of the Baptist Children's Village, that's very personal to me. I tell people all the time, after I left the Baptist Children's Village, it wasn't the words of the executive director that I remember. It wasn't the words of the therapist or the case manager or the campus director. That's not who I remember. It was the words of the house parent that I remember. When we all get together and we tell stories and we have reunions and all of that, it's the house parents that we talk about. That we have children, you receive children from 2 places. One is from the state of Mississippi, one is private placement. The house parent is the person that sits on the bed with the little girl who's now been to her 4th pre-adoptive placement, only to be told, this isn't a good fit. The house parent's the person that sits on the bed with her and cries with her and explains to her, no, there is a creator of this entire universe that loves you so much that he sent his own son down here to die for you. That's what That's what we need. You don't need to know all the answers. You don't need to have the pearls of wisdom. Our favorite house parents were always the ones who really never said much. They just kind of sat there and listened. Just kind of nodded. I found out when we had real problems and we needed to go talk to somebody, it was always the ones who never said anything that we actually went to hear from. Those are the house parents. Why do you do this? That is what we do. But why do you do this? And I'm going to buzz through this because I want to leave time for y'all to ask questions. The why is because the Bible tells us to. God, 42 times in the Old Testament, told his children how they would treat the fatherless. The word for orphan, I'll tell y'all this story. At the Baptist Children's Village, we always played in church league basketball, softball, whatever. And we would travel around, and they'd put us on the bus, and here we would go to compete, and we had this cheer, we always did. We are the orphans, the mighty, mighty orphans. Everywhere we go, people want to know who we are, so we tell them, we are the orphans, the mighty, mighty orphans. Well, our house parents are pretty much doing what y'all are doing right now, which is, oh man, please stop doing that. That's really odd. And so we would just do it louder, But then I got to thinking about it, and I thought, I'm not an orphan. I've got a mom. She's a drunk. I've got a dad, don't know where he is, he's a criminal. But I'm not an orphan. Well, I had the opportunity to go back and study that word. In the Old Testament, the word for orphan is Yafon. And it literally means fatherless. It doesn't mean both parents had passed away. The orphans back then, either their father had chased other gods against the law of God, or he was killed in battle, or maybe these were children of temple prostitutes or something like that. But the point was, they had no father, they had no representative. Back then in the Jewish culture, he was the person who gave the identity. He was the person who gave the protection. He was the person who gave the provision. And they didn't have that. And so how do you think these kids acted? How do you think they spoke? They didn't have a guide. They didn't have a rule. In the New Testament, we get our word of orphan from the Greek word orphanos. It doesn't mean both parents are dead either. It means uncomforted or unguided. When Christ said, I will not leave you as an orphan, what he actually said was, I'll not leave you without an instructor and a guide. He was speaking of the Holy Spirit. This becomes, I can put it in a better picture now for our children. Yes, we were orphans. But you know what I've learned? I'm not the only orphan in this room. We were all in need of a Savior, weren't we? We were all in need of a Father. We were all in need of that. And this is just a beautiful picture. It's just a beautiful picture of God. So that's the why. Because in James it says, be not just hearers of the word, but what? Be doers. Be doers of the word. And so that's the why for the Baptist Children's Village. A couple of things that I do want you to think about, and I tell every group this. One, think about house parents. Think about who you know who might be able to serve, who would be perfect for that. Have them give us a call. But there's two other things that I want you to take away from here. And that is this. If you want to know what you can do for us, remind me to talk about the state, because I blew past that and I'm going to forget that. Remember, I need to tell you about the state, but I want to finish this. I have learned that everybody knows, y'all are the people, and I see the Baptist Children's Village as one of the evangelical arms of every Baptist church in this state. And I take that very, very seriously. It wasn't the successful law practice that fulfilled my life. It wasn't the education. It wasn't all of those things. It's only Christ who can fill that hole and give meaning to not just life, but actually give meaning to suffering. I'll talk about that in a minute. But in that, when you see these homes and you see these problem families, and you're looking at them, sometimes when we see that, that need's too big for any one family. That need may be too big for any one church. You know what's going on in there. Maybe there's addiction issues, there's criminal issues, and sometimes that's just too big and maybe a little too scary. Understand this. We get tempted to walk on the other side of the road sometimes. But because you're a part of the Baptist and the cooperative program here, First Baptist Church has always been huge. Because of that, you have us. Folks, the need's not too big for us. It's what we do. So I like to give information, how to talk. Go meet those people with the love of Christ. Let them know, hey, there's a place. Introduce them to us. Give them their number. You don't have to walk on the other side of the road. You can go in and share information about the Baptist Children's Village. Put them in touch with us. We'll take it from there. If this is a family that we can't help, we won't drop them. We'll get them to somebody that can help them. We're not a therapeutic entity. Sometimes children need therapy. We know those institutions. We can get them there. We can help them. This is all for the purpose that we don't walk and turn away and walk on the other side of the road. We take this very, very seriously because it is what we do. I have to come back to the thing with the state. I forgot to tell you this. I want you to understand this. We have a great relationship with the state of Mississippi. We work with CPS and all of that. And when I said that you've been doing this for 120 years, there's some misinformation about this, so I want to get it straight. You do that without any money from the federal government or the state government. We take no money from the federal or the state government. 100% of our money comes from the Baptist Convention here in Mississippi, the Baptist churches in the state of Mississippi, and people just like me. I check the mail every day, I promise. When you got that budget going on, I look every single day. People ask me all the time, say, why don't you take the state's money and take their children? There are a couple of confusing things on this issue, and sometimes people say, well, surely they take the money. They're licensed by the state. Your Baptist Children's Village is licensed by the state of Mississippi. Understand that is voluntarily on our part. We do not have to be licensed by the state of Mississippi. But the state of Mississippi cannot give children to an agency that is not licensed by them. So people ask me all the time. And I have not met in a private meeting with the new CPS director, but I did with Dr. David Chandler, who was the CPS director who just left. And he even asked me, he said, say, let me ask you. He said, y'all don't take our money. Why are you licensed? And I told him, and I tell everybody this, we're licensed by the state of Mississippi for one reason and one reason only. They take children into their custody that need to hear the gospel message of Christ. I have no confidence in any other agency or the state to do it. That's the only reason we're licensed by the state. 100%. Well, why don't you take their money? Wouldn't it be easier? Oh yeah, it's a lot of money. It'd be a whole lot easier, to be quite honest with you. But we don't take the money from the state for two reasons. One, God didn't tell the state to take care of the children, He told us to. Two, we're never going to subordinate that gospel message of Christ. I've told Dr. Chandler, we have a great relationship. And understand this, the state has never told us you can't take the children to church. They've never told us any of these horror stories you may hear. But I have told them, if you do, I'll mail you back your license. You won't have to worry about us anymore. That's how serious it is to us. So where's God in all of this? If God were all loving and all powerful, if He could do this, why is there a need for the Baptist Children's Village? Why does my buddy David actually came when he was 5 years old. And we had this saying at the village, and it always cranked up right about summertime, and that was, home for good. This summer I'm going home for good. My parents are getting back together. They're coming to get us. We're going home for good. Well, David went home for good when he was 8 years old. His home for good lasted until he was 13, and I have his permission to tell this story. He tells it for us. When he was 13 years old, the state of Mississippi had to go into his house and remove him for his own safety. He sat in the social worker's office down on the coast, and they said, well, who are your grandparents? He said, I don't have any grandparents. Who are your aunt and uncles? I don't have any aunt and uncles. Well, you got to have somebody. I got to send you somewhere. I don't have anybody. You got to have somebody. I don't have anybody, he says. But I do remember one time I lived at this place called the Baptist Children's Village. Well, she knew the village. She picks up the phone and she dials the number. Paul Nunnery, I spoke to Paul back there, and he remembered Paul Nunnery, who was the executive director when I grew up. He was a recovering lawyer, like I'm a recovering lawyer now. And he was an impressive man, and he was a boisterous man, and you could hear his voice. And David said, I'll never forget, this lady said, hey, this is so-and-so, DHS, it was DHS back then. And I got this boy here, David Rainey, he said he used to live with y'all. Do you want him? And David said, I can remember hearing Paul on the other end of that line say, well, are you going to bring him to me? Or do I need to come get him? David came back to the Baptist Children's Village. We reacquainted, became fast, best buddies again. But David wasn't going to graduate from high school because David had just been passed through. He had gotten into a lot of trouble. And he just passed through. So they had coming up with a plan for David that they could get him his GED and see what they could do for him. Why am I serious about the gospel? The summer after David came back to the Baptist Children's Village, he got saved. 2 years later, I had moved to New Albany, Mississippi. You had a home there. And I called and I said, David, you got to come to New Albany. Talked to the powers that be, and they said David would be a good fit up there. He's doing good. David moved to New Albany. I'm walking him in downtown New Albany. And there's some kids there David's age. And I said, David, you got to meet these people coming over. And I'm introducing to these kids his age. On the way home, David says to me, see, that's the prettiest girl I ever met in my life. I'm going to marry that girl. I said, David, I know you're a Christian now and all that, but that girl's daddy owns that bank right there. You better let that girl alone. No, Steve, I want to marry that girl. In June of this year, David and Martha Witt celebrated their 26th wedding anniversary. In the spring of this year, I sat at Palm Bridges Park and watched his daughter win the state mixed doubles tennis tournament from WPA High School in London. I've seen his two boys graduate. One plays soccer right now in London. The boy that wasn't going to graduate high school graduated from Blue Mountain College the same year his oldest son graduated from high school. The guy that wasn't going to graduate from high school serves on the Board of Education for the city of Albany right now. Where's God? Blessed me with a beautiful family. I had to go to another continent to get a wife, but that's okay. We have two beautiful children. My wife loves to collect Demitasse cups. I promise I have never broken one. But I got to thinking about that when somebody else broke one time and it wasn't me. Which one was more beautiful? The Demitasse cup before it was broken? Or one that got put back together more beautifully than it was before it got broken in the first place? You know, sometimes we need to be in need before we can see a provider. We need to understand the depth of our sin before we see the need for a Savior. We need to be in a bad place before we can see how great God is. You know, now I look at it and I go, wait a minute. 60 years before I'm in Port Gibson, Mississippi, in need of saving, 60 years before I'm born, God had a plan. And He put together the Baptist Children's Village. And He set all of this up so that children who are going to be stepping in need because of the answer and the obedience of His people. Oh no, I know where God is. God's sitting on the park benches beside the mothers. God's sitting in the car when the bullets are flying. God is always there. I don't ask where God is anymore. I ask where His people are. And sometimes I wonder if God wonders where His people are. But y'all have always been there. You have done what God asked you to do. That's the miracle of the Baptist Children's Village. And that's why the gospel message is so important, guys. So let me open it up. See if y'all have any questions. You can't embarrass me. You can ask me about my family, anything about the village you heard, you wondered about. I love to kill rumors. So I'll tell you straight out. Anybody have any questions?
How many children right now are involved in the village?
Our census right now is 64. We have 64. There are two open cottages on 7 campuses around the state. Up north, we have we're having to deal with the state and deal with some education up there. Because right now I've got 2 campuses that have 3 children. And you'll hear a lot about the child care crisis throughout the state of Mississippi. Actually working with the Baptist Convention right now, and I'll be meeting them. We're going to try to get some good information out on that so people understand exactly what's going on and how to read that. But we can take more children. We can take more children.
Where are your campuses?
Independence, Mississippi, Water Valley, Mississippi, Nanawoya, which is near Louisville, Mississippi, Star, Mississippi, Brookhaven, Mississippi, Waynesboro, Mississippi, and Wiggins, Mississippi, down on the coast, Stone County.
Is it now where you have to have the kids within a radius of their parents?
Good question. Good question.
Is that still a law or whatever?
Yeah, that's always been a regulation, and there's some confusion about it. That's always been a regulation. But what happened was the state of Mississippi got sued by a child advocate group. I really think it's a monetary scam, but neither here nor there. And so they really moved to enforce that 50-mile radius thing. The village has always just kind of enjoyed this special relationship with the state. And, you know, right now we're jam-packed in our southern campuses. Next year we'll be jam-packed up north, and nobody, you know, it just ebbs and flows. But if they've called, and we had one this past week, they called and, oh, we really need them in Wiggins. Well, we're full. But I've got Waynesboro, and that's more than 50 miles away, but they still give them to us. They still give, but yes, that is the regulations. It's actually part of the settlement on the lawsuit. But that thing is so mixed and turned. And
is that the foster care law that they said y'all affected by that? It was just changed?
The foster care. The foster care what that is, and that's part of the whole faith-based initiative that you're going to hear about, and you've probably already heard about, and they're trying to get more people to be foster parents. The state of Mississippi has over 6,000 children in custody. Over 6,000. The question is, what do they do with them? And they need more foster parents to help them. And so we're very big proponents of the foster care system, and we're willing to even help. Maybe even we're talking about providing some training, what we will do there. And if you know a foster family, or if you want to be a foster family, or the church has some foster families, one of the best things you can do is kind of work around that family. Come and be their rod or their staff for them. Take the kids for a night, let them, have a weekend or something like that. If you can provide what we call respite care for foster parents, that really helps strengthen that foster family. But yes, that's all part of the crisis that you hear about. My only take on it is, hey, we've had the problem for over 120 years, and I do have to try to get them to modulate some of their language, because some of the things that I hear is, oh, the church has fallen. If the church would just step up. Whoa. Y'all been doing this for 120 years. Don't let nobody tell you hadn't done nothing. Now, is there more we can do? Absolutely. And we want to be involved. We want to be. I'm thrilled to death that the state has finally figured out, hey, we can't do this without the church. But my conversation with the state is, hey, what's your regulation? Don't go to the church, but then deny their values or the God they serve. They aren't state employees. So we're having those kind of conversations.
On that, how is Baptist Children, how's it growing?
How's it
growing?
How's the Children's Village growing?
Right.
In terms, if I define growing for me.
Well, are you looking for more campuses? Are you looking to be able to take more children?
Okay.
Are there funds that are needed to support that, or
yes.
What's the direction that?
All right, good questions. Yes is the answer, but let me explain that a little bit. Right now, there is a lot of need to work out on getting the children in. We have beds right now. I want to maybe open some other campuses, but you can't really do that when you have empty beds. People look at you like, hey, man, you can't fill those beds. And I'm having such a hard time with house parents. Getting good house parents in, I have to have those to do that. But I do look at a map of the state of Mississippi, and I see where our cottages are and our campuses are, and I think, and there's a lot of pastors on me right now to put a home in the Delta. They need it. We need a presence in the Delta. I have an issue with that, though. If I put a home in the Delta, I have to be able to educate the children. So we're getting out of the box and trying to work with some Christian schools in the area to see if we can maybe work something out to make that happen. But we do have other areas around the state that I want to put a campus in. We do that. We'll run a campaign, get the word out on the money to request the money to build those campuses.
Are your kids short-term or long-term? Like, what's the
Great
percentage
question.
that go back to their families or with you the whole time?
Great question. We get our families, we get our children from two sources. One is from the state of Mississippi. If they go in and take children and they give them to us, those children, the stay is usually about 2 years right now. That's the average on those. The ones where the parents, we get them and the state is not involved, those can be longer. We have children, I've got two families right now that I think we'll probably put through college. But the average stay for them, I'd probably put it 6 years would be the average stay, 4 to 6.
And if they're with you long-term, you'll put them through college?
Yes.
Where in Mississippi College?
We have 5 children right now, and all of them are in community college, and when they graduate from there, I have 2 that are going to be getting a 4-year degree, and they want to go to Mississippi State. So, but I do work with Blue Mountain, William Carey, and Mississippi College, and these kids do have the benefit of being able to qualify for grants and those kind of things. But the amount that's left over, I can go see Turk at MC and go, hey, buddy, can you help me out on the, and they're very good to do that. But if there's money left to be paid that needs to be paid, we pay it.
And you help them get a car.
Oh yeah, we provide a car for them that we help them buy. they put a little money up. We teach them about insurance, and we have a girl right now who has a car. She's scared to death to drive it. And she's a state girl, and boy, you know, a lot of times our good relationship with the state, they just kind of keep their mouth closed because one of the regulations is we can't teach them to drive, and we can't do all this stuff. We do.
What's the average age of the child in the village right now about?
Right now, I would say it's roughly 10 years old. 9, 10 years old.
Well, what's the youngest child you can take?
We can take a 1-year-old. Our youngest one right now is 3, and let's not talk about those little brothers because every time we go to Wiggins, Elizabeth tries to cram them in my truck. So, we every time we go within 20 miles of the campus, the car's going. And,
That's every campus.
She's in love with all the children.
Yeah.
My son has actually slapped me on the knee walking out of the house and said, "Dad, I don't think I'm the last kid you're going to raise." So, that's okay too. We all know it's getting close to church time. But thank y'all so much. Thank y'all so much. If you have any questions, if you hear something, you're like, "Why don't they what's in it?" Give me a call. Let's, you know, I love to make sure everybody's informed about your ministry. Bill, thank you.
Thank you, Sean, for being here. Just very, very briefly, you want to reinstitute the program for like weekend stays and that kind of thing. And could you say just a quick thing about that?
Thank you. One of the things that we're going to be working on, when I grew up, we had what was called visitation families. And I had a family who took me for every Christmas. They took me to summer. I went snow skiing. I mean, you know, they would just take me with them when they went. Y'all, this is so important to the kids because, you know, they can learn about Christ and they can do that, but they haven't seen the other side over there. And they don't get to be in families where there's Christian mom and dad. And yeah, there's still conflict, but how that gets worked out. And so I tell people all the time, one of the things they need is to see the other side of the track. Because if they don't know what it looks like, they hear about it, but they're not going over there. People ask me all the time, "Hey, how did you do this, do this?" Yeah, I'm scared. And I've jumped out of an airplane. The scariest thing I ever did was try to move from this side to this side. It's the big unknown. And so we're going to be putting back together our visitation families and getting information out about that. And that's just where you come just take a kid for the weekend. You know, if you got something planned. Or it doesn't have to be big. That's the big thing. You don't have to go to Disney World. Hey, just have them in the house, go to a movie. I mean, let them see Christian families operate.
Our class can help you with that. Thank you.
I'll get y'all information when we get it together.
All right. Cody, could you dismiss us, please?
Sure.